Mic off.
Okay, Becky, I think that's 15 seconds.
Great. Welcome to our May 12th Finance Committee meeting. In accordance with an act to implement provisions necessary to the health, welfare, and safety of the citizens of Maine in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency, as enacted to read Section G11 MRSA, Section 403A, public proceedings through remote access during. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry, my it went away. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. In accordance with Maine safety of the citizens of Maine in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency, as enacted to read Section G11 MRSA, Section 403A, public proceedings through remote access during the declaration of a state of emergency for COVID-19 and for 30 days following the termination of that state of emergency. The regular board meeting will be held through Google Meet. The meeting will be live streamed and available for viewing at MSAD11.org. Again, www.msad11.org. Call to order. I would ask members of the Finance Committee to name themselves for the call or to order. All right, I'm having to go between devices here to get.
Becky, we're struggling to hear you, or at least I'm struggling to hear you.
I'm sorry, is that better?
That's better.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Becky Fless, yay. Linda Caputo.
Here.
Alyssa Tracy.
Yay.
Jim Lockridge.
Yay.
John Umland.
Yay.
Thank you. Jim, you had something you wanted to say?
Yes, I did. I wanted in a public forum, since I was in a public forum on Thursday, and I think I was very harsh with Angela. And she and I had a long conversation today and a very good meetings of the mind. So I wanted to apologize to her in a public forum since I made the issue come up in a public forum. So I do apologize to Andrea. I honestly think she does a great job, and I've told other people that. So anyways, I won't take up any more of the time, but since it wasn't a public forum, it should be done in a public forum. Thank you, Angela. I appreciate your time today.
You're welcome, Jim, anytime.
Thank you.
Jim, thank you for that. And I did want to just take a moment. I appreciate you doing that, Jim. I did want to just take a moment to remind board members during this particularly tricky time that none of us is accustomed to. We are very used to being together, and we sort of feed off of one another's energy, which is part of the beauty of being a member of this, or the opportunity of being a member of this board. I'm missing it, and I think we're all missing it. And when we're doing virtual meetings in this fashion, it really does make things challenging sometimes. And so I want to remind board members the importance of, at this time, because we don't talk regularly, to be sure you keep up with emails. Check your emails every day. And if there's nothing, that's a great day. But there might be 10 emails one day. And it's really important for us to keep up, to check our emails, read our emails. And if there's anything in it that we've missed or that we don't understand, to send an email to Pat or to Andrea or to Angela. Send an email. And the other thing that's really important is that if one board member needs it, all board members need it. So if you've got a question, chances are everybody has the same or a similar question, and there are no bad questions. So I'd like to remind us to just keep up with our emails, to be excited and anxious for the opportunity to be back in the boardroom together, which is where we do our best work. And in the meantime, to keep up and be patient with each other. Our experience is that our superintendent and her staff have never led us down a bad road, and that they have the students and they have our taxpayers at the front of every decision that they make and every guidance that they give us. So I'd like to encourage everyone to think positively about our leadership. And if you have something that isn't working well, please bring it up, and that we would do it respectfully and kindly, as Jim has just done for us. And the last thing is, when you feel mad coming along, which I do, and frustrated coming along, breathe and count to five. It sometimes is helpful, not by fives, but count to five. So with that in mind, let's proceed with the agenda. First on the agenda, go ahead.
But before we begin, maybe we should, administrators should introduce themselves for those people at home who may not know who we are.
Yes, that would be great. Administrative staff, would you please introduce yourselves?
Sure. Pat Hopkins, superintendent. And then why don't I call on individuals? I think it might make it easier.
Would be
So
great.
Andrea,
Andrea Dish, business manager.
Angela,
Angela Hardy, Director of Curriculum.
Chad,
Chad Kempton, high school principal.
Christina,
Christina O'Neill, principal of Pittston Randolph Consolidated School.
Alicia,
Alicia Morris, Director of Special Services.
John,
John Lucaria, principal of Gardner Regional Middle School.
Josh,
Josh Farr, Director of Adult Education.
Katie,
Katie Gould, principal at Helen Thompson School.
Karen,
Karen Moody, building principal of Laura Richards School.
Nate,
Nate Stubbert, athletic director.
Terry,
Terry McGuire, Director of Technology.
and Vicky.
Vicki Duguay, principal of Riverview Community School.
Those are the only administrators I see. If there's someone else out there, I'm sorry I can't see you. I think that's it. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the 2021 academic budget.
Pat, before we begin, could we go over the documents that were emailed out Thursday and Friday to see if the Finance Committee and the board members have any questions regarding carry forward and fund balance before?
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you start by reviewing the documents that you sent out? And those documents were sent as a response to a request for additional information.
Right. So Thursday night, all school board members received a UN carry forward report. Carry forward is also called unallocated fund balance for those of you with an accounting background. By statute, as I've said in many of our meetings, there are only two things that unallocated fund balance can be used for. The first is to buy down a budget in a subsequent year to apply those carry forward funds to what the taxpayers might otherwise need to fund, and we call that carry forward. The other option for using carry forward is the use of reserve funds. Currently, the district has a capital improvement reserve fund that we established last year. We are, as part of this budget year, proposing an additional special ed reserve fund to be used for special ed expenses. The department, the legislature, has given us authority has increased our ability to use reserve funds. It's basically, it's easier for us to use And by easier, it used to be that in previous years, we had to hold a public forum. The public would vote to establish a reserve account. The public would establish, or there would be a motion to transfer from an unallocated fund balance to the reserve account. And anytime that we needed to expend those funds, the taxpayers would need to be held in a public forum and vote for the use or expenditure of those funds. With the additional use of reserve funds, the state is now allowing the school board to approve expenditures that we would otherwise be required to expend. For example, special purpose private schools, sending students out of the district to attend to special purpose private schools. So on Thursday, I sent an email with the fund balance for the year end as of June 30th, 2019. I also sent the backup so that you could see where in the audited financial statements I got that figure. The fund balance at year end was 3.4 million and change. As you can see from the document that we committed 1.3 to the current year budget. We are proposing committing another 1.3 to next year's budget. Pat and I discussed with you that we are anticipating a curtailment from the state. And what that means is rather than the state giving us all of the money that it has promised for the current budget year, or actually for next budget year, that they would curtail or take a portion of that back. So we are preparing for 500,000 in curtailment. This is the first time any of us have ever had a COVID crisis. So we thought, or I thought, and Pat and I have discussed that 500,000 should be sufficient in the event of a curtailment. So after that, that leaves us 310,000 and change left. The next that you see is the anticipated commitment for FY22, which drives the balance into the hole by $1 million. So what's ever left over from our in our fund balance or our budget this year would be used to go to FY22. In addition, we have discussed using some of the funds remaining from this budget year to create that reserve account. We are currently proposing a reserve account for special ed, approximately $250,000. That is not included in the spreadsheet, but I wanted, since this was a conversation about fund balance and what's in this year's budget isn't currently unallocated fund balance, it was not included in the document that I sent. Any questions regarding year-end fund balance?
Board members, is that clear? I mean, does everyone understand how that works and what that means? Just want to be sure.
Thank you, Andrea.
Fund balance and carry forward can be confusing.
The other document that I sent to you was how there was some confusion about how each town is assessed what they are assessed. So I did a simple spreadsheet and basically I showed, or I provided the documentation for the board members and administrators so they could see from the ED 279, which is a state compiled document, the valuation that was given to us to use for the calculation of assessments. So you have, I gave you 2016, 17, 2018, 19, 19, 20, and 2021. And on that document, I highlighted or I circled in red the valuation piece. And what you could see is the value of each of our 4 communities and the total. So based on the percentage of the whole, each community is responsible for that percentage of the amount to be funded locally. So there's the budget. And then from the budget on the worksheet, you can see where I have created up to the top left, a list of miscellaneous revenue, such as tuition, such as SAC, such as transportation expenditures, things that we are receiving revenue from other than the state or the local municipalities. So that is taken off the top. Then I subtract out the state contribution. Whatever is left is the amount to be funded locally. So that is the calculation you see for each of the 3 budget years. Is there any question regarding the 3-year budget comparison and how the assessments were calculated? Okay. The last document that I emailed out was another budget that I'm actually not going to talk about, but I'm going to tell you it was emailed on Friday morning. It includes 1 social worker and 1 additional instructional coach. And I wanted to see what it would take to bring all of our 4 communities to a negative, to a reduction in their assessments, which is why I did it. And once I did it, I decided to share it with you. So I don't know that we're going to discuss that particular version, but since we were concerned about some towns receiving a decrease and others receiving increase, I just wanted to give you a glance at another version. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat, unless there's something else that she would like for me to discuss before I turn it over. Your microphone is off.
Pat, you're muted. Pat.
Sorry, I'm so used to always having my mic on. I apologize, but I shut it off because I heard that there was feedback. And so in case it was my feedback, I shut it off. So I apologize. Andrea, thank you very much. I appreciate you creating all of those documents and sharing it. So I guess I would look to Becky. I'm not sure how you want us to begin. We had a meeting on Thursday night, a regular board meeting. And at that time, there was some discussion regarding the potential addition of a social worker, 2 coaches, and there was discussion regarding the elimination of 2 probationary teachers as a result of a reduction in teaching positions in order to align our budget with the class size policy. So we decided at that time it was better to kind of bring the conversation back to the finance committee to have another conversation. So I really want to hear what board members are thinking, what their thoughts are. I guess I would go back to the presentation that I initially shared on Thursday night, that when, as a finance committee, last time you met a week ago, we presented information that brought the budget down to less than a 1% increase, but it was a $300,000 increase to taxpayers. At that time, finance committee members expressed disappointment that our budget did not allow for us to add a social worker or to add coaches for staff to the budget. After the finance meeting, we learned that there was a calculation error on the worksheet, and that had to do with the state valuation. As a result, we learned that the budget that you were approving indeed had a decrease to taxpayers of close to $300,000. So when we came back together on Friday night, it was to consider the potential of adding in the social worker and 2 coaches based on what I had heard at the finance committee meeting, and I know what was previously discussed at curriculum committee meetings. We thought that that was in line with what the board was interested in doing. I know that there was some concern about that. And so here we are tonight to kind of revisit and have discussions, a more in-depth conversation about those proposals. So Becky, I'm not sure how you want to facilitate the meeting, but we're certainly here to answer questions and concerns that board members may have. But we, as an administrative team, we still support that proposal. We still support the need to have a social worker and a need to have the coaches for when students return, when staff return, there is considerable need for them to have that support. I would also remind, and I didn't say this on Thursday night, the district management group, if you will recall, we entered into a 2-year contract with the district management group because they were taking a look at our practices, helping us to move forward in implementing systems that supported our struggling learners and better supported our teachers. And as a result of their report and their analysis, they were recommending that we add these coaching positions, that we have far fewer coaches than most school districts, and that they felt that we would benefit greatly. Not only would students academically benefit from it, but teachers would also grow and benefit from having that level of support. So I will stop there and turn it over to you, Becky, to facilitate.
Thank you, Pat. And with that in mind, the district management group was something that we decided as a board, voted on as a board to spend that money and to enter into that contract. So I do think we are obligated at some level to listen to their expertise if we have decided to spend that money and to get their assistance. A question that I do have, Pat, is we received a resignation from a kindergarten teacher the other night. What is the impact to that to the budget?
We still need to fill that position.
That position will be
class size are such that that position needs to be refilled.
Okay, just wanted to be clear about that. And Alyssa, you had a clarifying question.
Yep, I was going to ask what you just asked, Becky, so that was one. Thank you. I just wanted to be clear, the one that we just received from you, Andrea, that we didn't necessarily talk about, but that has the reduction, is that the one that includes these other things like the social worker and 2 coaches? I just want to be clear on what version we should be looking at.
So the version that you received from me on Friday, is that the version that you're looking at?
Well, it looks like it says requested 5/12, so you might have sent it today, or that's the date that came through.
It's probably the date that it came through.
Okay, yep.
So what I did, I actually went in and made changes to the budget. So Alicia, in her proposal to add the special ed teacher, was proposing eliminating 2 ed tech positions. I went in the budget, I eliminated the 2. They were both unfilled ed tech positions, and I added an instructional coach in accordance with the same level of our one existing instructional coach. And then I'm trying to think of what else I did. I added, obviously, the middle school special ed teacher. So I actually went in and made changes. You know, the reason that Pat and I had talked about leaving the $300,000 in while picking up these positions is with everything going on with COVID. Pat and I have discussed whether or not the district might be required to make multiple bus runs due to, the number of students on a bus. So we were in our discussion, we were trying to prepare for a lot of the unknowns that are happening with this crisis. Based on the conversation that we had Thursday night, it was clear that 300,000 was not an option. So I actually went in and made specific cuts and changes, and that is what was shared with you. It reflects the special ed middle school teacher, the social worker, and the 1 instructional coach.
Perfect. Thank you. That's what I wanted to get to. I think I would just say, I did review it before the meeting and wanted to be clear. Becky, I would just say that I would feel comfortable with this budget as they've presented. It looks a little more equitable, to Jim's point last week when we talked about across the towns and such. So that covers what I had. Thank you.
Could I make a
board members? I'm sorry, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I came across in one respect. I'm not opposed to an increase in the towns. I'm not trying to look for a negative on all of the towns. What I'm looking at is I'm just terribly fearful that we are going to end up towards the middle of next year and the towns may not have the money nor the state to give us the money that we're expecting. I'm just being overly cautious. I see the benefit of coaches, and I really see the benefit of the need for a social worker, because these kids are going to come back, some of them, not all of them that have a good support at home. They're going to be fine. But I'm concerned about those that have been unable to have the support at home. Mom and dad have both been working maybe 2 jobs because everything's been reduced. They haven't got full hours. So I'm more of inclined to, I'd like to see us push back in the social worker. And then if the CARE Act were to have any opportunities for us to look at a coach at that point, I think that might be a way to go. That's just a thought, food for thought. Thank you.
May I respond to Jim?
Yes.
And I just want to respond about the CARES Act. As Andrea said, we're beginning to hear more and more about what the guidance might look like for starting up school next year. And there's talk about continued remote learning. There's talk about continued social distancing, increasing the level of sanitation that has to happen during the school year, looking at multiple bus runs. And so at one time, we discussed as part of the CARES Act that maybe we could set aside money for that coach. But I think the reality is going to be we're going to have to pay for masks for students. And for teachers. We may have various PPEs. We have other expenses. I think that we don't even realize yet that are going to surface. So we have to make sure that we have that one-time expenditure, that money really set aside for those expenses versus using the money for a position that could very well be with us for multiple years. And as Andrea said, I am concerned that we could be in a situation that we are going to have to find alternative methods in getting kids to school. And where will that money come from? We just don't have an answer yet. One thing that we did talk about, we being like Angela and Andrea and I today talked about, is, if there are positions that are not immediately required positions, teaching classrooms or teachers for classrooms, those are absolutely essential positions that we must hire for now and offer contracts to. But if there are positions that are not absolutely essential, that we can hold off on issuing contracts until we get another month or 2 down the road and get a better sense of maybe what the expectations and requirements are going to be for the start of the school, then maybe that's something that we have to do in order to ensure we have flexibility in our budget to cover those unanticipated expenses.
Pat, I just want to add, sitting through a CARES Act meeting, the department is not advocating for us to put ongoing positions in the CARES Act, because obviously, like the ARA funds from years ago, that money falls off. So that is not their recommendation, to be putting ongoing positions in that one-time grant.
Similar to the TIF grant, where we were required to use that money for sustainable things. So it's really important that we focus on that.
I have a question for Pat.
Yes, go ahead.
Last week we talked about probationary teachers. And if there's any opportunity, this is my own personal feeling, if there's any opportunity where we could do some lateral moves, I'm not worried about class sizes, but I don't want to lose good young teachers because they're going to be few and far between. We are an aging group. Teachers are getting older. We need young, quality people. And if we've got good people in place, no matter what grade they're in, if we can laterally move them to another location or whatever we can do to keep them, I would strongly support that. That's just a personal feeling. Thank you.
So Jim, to respond, administrators spend an extensive amount of time with all of our probationary teachers, doing formal observations, doing informal observations. I conduct an informal observation. And so it is always our intent to help grow our probationary teachers, to support them throughout their probationary years. And if, when it's appropriate and we are able to move people, we certainly take that all into consideration. So we are working hard behind the scenes to make sure that all of our staff are well qualified, are trained, and are able to provide the strongest instructional program possible to our students. So I make that commitment to you.
Can I say something? Oh, am I on?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay,
Yep.
sorry. Again, I just want to remind us as a board that last year that we wanted a social worker at the elementary level and more instructional coaches. I still support fully putting in the 2 instructional coaches and a social worker at the elementary level. I'm aware of the burden to taxpayers and to the situation that we might be in. However, we really need to keep our students in mind as they return to school. Listening to Angela today really explain the job of the coaches and the amount of children that they help through, not just through working with the teachers, is essential to making sure that when teachers come back to school, however that's going to look, that they're not overwhelmed and they're given the support they need to make sure that they're reaching all children that had support at home, children that didn't have support at home. So that's just my 2 cents. It's an opinion that's not going to change for me. I fully support putting in both those positions and the social worker.
Other comments from board members, please?
Hey, this is John. I'm fully supportive of the social worker, but I think a lot of the conversation has been hit on tonight that, no economist can predict what's going to happen next month, let alone September. I think, that we did have this analysis completed. However, it was completed in a different time. And adding on coaches at this moment, I don't think is prudent. Given that we have no clue what's going to happen budgetary in the future. And while I think the coaches are great, don't get me wrong, it's definitely not against that. I also, from what I understand, and I could be way off base, so definitely, Pat, please, let me know differently, or Angela. Coaches are coaching the teachers. They're not hands-on with any of the students. Is that accurate?
Angela, would you like to respond?
John, there are different coaching models out there. In our district, we use a student-centered coaching model. So while the primary objective of the instructional coach is to work with teachers, they are actually directly working with students simultaneously. A student-centered coaching model requires a coach to partner with the teacher to look at the data and the instructional objectives, to co-plan, to co-instruct, to reflect, to provide ongoing feedback during the classroom instruction period, to model instruction with small groups of students, so that person is working with small groups of students, illustrating how to accelerate a group or how to support a group who's struggling, reflecting with teachers, looking at the resulting data and student work, setting new objectives and goals. So while a coach does work with a teacher, and a teacher has an impact on at least 20 students at the K-5 level, and a coach can work with 5 to 10 teachers simultaneously across a 4-week cycle, 4 to 6 week cycle, and then shift teachers. Ultimately, the coach is working indirectly with 800 students and directly with up to 30 teachers in a year.
So, and I guess, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Angela. I don't know. I don't have the answer. None of us have the answer. I just feel it's difficult to be adding coaches at this time with no foresight of what's going to be happening in the future. And personally, I just feel that students would benefit more from one-to-one. If coaches were doing one-to-one, tutoring or whatever it may be, or, 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, whatever it may be, that's just how I feel they would benefit in the fall coming back from all of this. Go ahead, Angela, sorry.
No, I want to respect your statement. I understand, and that's our intervention model, is one teacher or one instructional staff person to 25 students, up to 25 students. The challenge is that person's working with 25 students across the year. If we are able to support staff as they're learning and growing, and our educational environment is constantly changing, not only from our internal objectives of improving our math instruction and literacy instruction in very particular ways, but also through these external factors that we've never experienced before. And a lot of our instructional coaches that I come in contact with have experienced both in virtual environments and in physical environments. And so I think it's really, I think what it indicates is your value for the adult, that that the adults that we hire are professional, hold themselves to really high expectations, work really hard with our students. And I don't disagree with that at all. I just also know that for teachers to evolve and grow and support their students, they need to be supported. They need to be supported in really effective ways. And without building in job embedded support that they can be provided during their regular teaching and learning cycle and during their prep periods during their day, that we're really asking our adults to do this on their own time. Or for me to pay them after school to do this. It's just a different approach.
I definitely don't want to be coming across as I undervalue any of this, because that's definitely not the case. I just question, the inclusion of it for the fall, for the next year's budget, with just so much unknown. And it's also that same unknown, I get it. It's also the same unknown that's trying to drive this decision. I totally and fully appreciate that. I'm fully supportive of the social worker. I just am very questionable about any additional coaches at this time. That's all. Thank you.
Alyssa and then Matthew.
Thanks, Becky. Pat or Angela, just a follow-up. So if this is for our budget for next year, since I'm new, I'll ask just a clarifying question. If we were to hire these folks, I assume you would do that over the summer months and then they would start whenever the new year starts, or what does that sort of timeline look like, just for clarification?
Yes, you are correct that we would advertise and hire over the summer. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, because of the uncertainty, one thing for us to consider that a lot of school districts are considering is, if this is a position that is supportive for our staff and our students, but not absolutely critical on day one, to maybe not issue contracts immediately, so that we have a little more leeway, a little more time to really assess and determine what the next few months are going to look like. So we could advertise, we could find someone, we could choose the individual that we wish to employ, but hold off issuing a contract till maybe August, the middle of August, if at all possible. So that way, some of the questions that we don't have answers to, we may have answers by that time. Now,
Perfect,
the
thank you.
downside of that is it may be difficult to attract people if you're not going to issue a contract, but
Yeah, that's what I was going to follow up with. I was going to ask Angela, I assume this is a small pool of people that have a special, this is going to sound awful, a special set of skills, but they kind of do have a special set of skills. Do we know, what is our chances of getting the people we're looking for? Do you have any insight on that?
I don't exactly. I know that there's a really well-established and network group of coaches as a result of the training that University of Maine at Farmington has offered. So I don't know what individual situations are and what their level of flexibility is in terms of committing to a contract. I do know that coaching is definitely generating interest in districts because it's proving effective over time, both in this state and nationally. So that's a factor. I also know that lots of school districts are in the same situation we are and may or may not be making the same decisions we are. I'm not sure if municipalities follow the same time frame with their budget decision-making processes that a school district, a regional district does. So I don't know if that would influence our ability to attract coaches. That is a really weak answer, I feel.
No, but it's,
but it's what I can offer.
No, it's perfect. It addresses kind of what I'm asking. I come from a project management background. You can only plan for what you know, right? I think that's what you presented us. So I would just add, at this point, I think we have to plan for what we think we've been asking for, to what Veronica said. And I'm in support of that, to at least get us an idea of who's out there, who we might be able to attract, and what we could do for next year. So thank you both.
So this is Matt. I guess I want to, for those folks that are watching from home that may not have access to any of the documentation that we've seen that Andrea has sent, I just kind of want to ask Andrea a quick question. And if we add the, on paper, as far as crunching numbers, if we add the social worker and 2 coaches, what does that look like in regards to percentage increase over last year's budget for each municipality? Is it minimal? Is it less than 1%? Is it negative? What is it?
Well, it's funny that you should ask. If we add the social worker and the 2 instructional coaches, our budget would be up 1.72%, or $442,992. As far as the assessments, it would be an overall decrease to the 4 towns of 27,580, or a percentage decrease of 0.28%. And again, while 3 of the 4 towns are seeing a decrease in their assessments, the town of Pittston would receive a slight increase of $3,301.29. And I will send that to you momentarily for you to review.
So it's a minimal increase. I think I looked on the sheet. I think the Gardner, it was like almost nothing, right, for the most part. But I think as far as the social worker and the 2 coaches go, I think we should go on what we know now. We should anticipate, I suppose, starting school on time this fall. And I think we should be prepared, given the amount of money it's really going to cost the taxpayer. It's relatively marginal. I think we probably ought to be prepared to roll into next year ready to go. So I would support all 3 positions.
Thank you, Matthew. Other board members?
This is Linda. I have a comment. I support hiring the social worker and the coaches. And we've been talking about the students and the amount of support that they are going to need. let's think about the teachers for a minute. They're getting students that haven't been in school for 6 months. Despite all the efforts made to remotely teach, the students are going to have missed important material. On top of that, we're having the elementary teachers start a brand new curriculum. And I think that for those two reasons that the coaches are critical that we hire the coaches just to support the teachers, because just as the students are going to have a hard time coming back, the teachers are being asked to do so much more because of the students being gone and the new curriculum on top of that. And we never know what's going to be in our future. Even if it weren't for COVID, you don't know. You act on the material in front of you at the moment. And I think it's critical that we do the coaches. And I'd like to respond to something else about the probationary teachers. You can't take a probationary teacher, I don't know who these teachers are. Let's say they were a second grade teacher and you have a need in 6th grade, and just move that teacher over there because they're probably not highly qualified. And while we may be losing an outstanding young teacher, you can't just shift people around in the education world. It's sort of like taking a welder from BIW and saying, well, we need you there anymore, but we're going to make you an electrical engineer. They're both critical parts of the system, but they can't just take one another's job. And in the teaching world, when you start a new position, you know you're probationary, you know there's a chance you may not be hired back. And while in the corporate world, that may seem very odd, in education, that's the way it is. Everybody knows that. And I'm sorry for those teachers, but that's kind of what they signed up for, and that's not news to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Angela, I'm wondering, at curriculum, you were able to pull up that beautiful, colorful chart to show the interactions that a coach had. Do you know what I'm referring to? Are you able to maybe show that to the board and speak really briefly about that, so that maybe John would have a clearer picture, and other board members who didn't see that might have a clearer understanding?
If that's okay with you, since you're the chair, I can do that.
It's okay with me. I would just like for people to really understand what coaches do and the importance of, and it's a different model. It's a different model than I grew up with, you know, the one-to-one and your teacher sitting next to you and holding your hand and helping you with your schoolwork. This is a different model, and different is sometimes I personally sometimes resist different. And so I think it's just really important for us to understand what different looks like and how different can be great for our kids. And I would also like to agree with Linda that we know what we have right now, and we didn't know we would be here, and we don't know where we will be then. So I think that we need to make some decisions right now that are in the best interest of our students and our staff moving forward. So yes, I'd love it if you could do that.
Okay. Takes just a minute. And it should be up now, right?
Yep, I can see it.
Yep.
Great.
Can you increase the size a little bit, Angela?
Yes, I can. It just makes
Thank
it a
you.
little harder for you to see what we're going to show you. Okay. So we'll look at this first chart that's color coded with the timestamps on the left. And this is an example of a 4 to 6 week student-centered coaching cycle where our coach, Lindsay, worked with 5 teachers. Working with 5 teachers is actually quite a bit in a 4 to 6 week cycle, and it's an intensive cycle. So there's opportunities, as you can see, they're coded here, for co-teaching, co-planning. And so co-planning can mean she meets with a teacher in advance and decides What is, why do you need, why do you wish support? What is the challenge you're experiencing in your classroom? What's working in your classroom? What does the data show about your students and how they're learning? And what is your goal? And that's against a broader framework, in this case, for math instruction that we have. And then they co-design together. The instructional coach is really invaluable because it's not just like following a math book page by page. It's really thinking and diagnosing, much like a doctor does in a clinical setting with a patient. What's actually going on here? Let's uncover this, and then let's try to plan using different resources, or using the same resources differently to work with your students. The coach then goes into the co-teaching mode, where a coach is either observing a teacher instructing something they planned and taking notes, co-teaching simultaneously. They work back and forth together with a group of students, and they're analyzing how the students are responding, and adjusting accordingly. Or model teaching. The instructional coach is leading a session with either a small group or a whole group, and the teacher is actually observing, not just the coach, but observing how his or her students react to that instruction. It creates more space for reflection for the teacher and an opportunity to see kind of an expert skill employed differently than the teacher may have been employing it. And then they lead into what is another co-planning session, which is a reflection. How did that go? How do we know? What is the evidence? What do we need to do differently next time? And then they move through the planning cycle yet again. And this occurs consistently multiple days per week, as you can see by the color coding, across a 4-week, 6-week cycle. We've learned that when you engage in this intensive student-centered coaching model, it changes the language that happens between teacher and student within a classroom. It changes the way someone can plan, organize, and reflect. It often changes the data. We look at the data, the student data, to see what the outcomes are and how those are different from prior outcomes. And it's job embedded. It's happening in real time when a teacher is working with students, and it's a partnership. It's a non-evaluative relationship, which is really key because that changes the power dynamics. This is really someone who's here to support and help someone grow professionally. And then, as you can see in this model, these are only like 15-minute time slots. So she's moving quickly from one teacher to another teacher. So she's really juggling a lot at once, with different objectives, different goals, different focus for instructional strategies. And then this, like, math lunch bunch, is where she's been able to pull together a group of teachers because they wished for it, and develop ongoing professional learning. They're giving up their lunch period by choice. They're eating while they're doing it. And they're really working through some dilemmas and some content and instruction that they wanted to have, and kind of instituted this practice in the building. It's something they haven't had before. And then, as you can see, it changes every 4 to 6 weeks. And what I do is, when there's a gap, I use that time with her to work with our Title I interventionist, math interventionist. So she does that on a monthly basis. So now they're having professional learning monthly in times when they've never had that. And we're able to embed that. We're changing the way we're doing all of our assessment practices. So she's teaching and working with them on that. And then she's doing this sort of a coaching cycle with our interventionists. How are they assessing? They're videotaping themselves and they're analyzing those videotapes, or she's going and observing or co-assessing. So it's actually expanding beyond our teacher pool to influence really any in person who's working with students. And then this is a last recent cycle. And as you can see, that looks a little different because she actually started working with teams of teachers. So it influenced a whole grade level across a school, over a 6-week cycle rather than one teacher at a time. And that proved to be powerful, but it was also so powerful because the entire team opted into the coaching cycle. And then she's also led professional development sequences for our K2 staff at regular intervals for 18 hours per person. And then she's also engaged in some coaching with our special education staff for those involved in a sequence of learning happening outside of our district. They're able to access the coach in our district to be able to follow through on implementing those strategies and having support in real time. And that actually is expanding up to the middle school level as well. So that's not just at the K-5 level. And then we were cut short, so I don't have any additional information. Lindsay's fantastic about making sure she shares and understands and meets with me weekly to know how she's using her time, how it's effective. I don't know who she's working with. That's also to avoid that evaluation cycle. And to share data to illustrate impact at the student level, not just behavioral data at the teacher level. Is that helpful?
Yes, well, I find it extremely helpful, and I was really pleased to sit in on curriculum today and hear this. I'm wondering if other board members have questions now, any different questions.
I'll just add that she's, the one thing that I don't know if I illustrated is that she does work regularly across all 4 schools. So it's not like she spends 4 to 6 weeks in one building and then 4 to 6 weeks in another. She's willing to drive across the district, even midday, in order to really move where our staff are ready to move.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Board members?
So 2 quick questions. One, so just to make sure I understand this correctly, Angela, I'm saying she because it does say Lindsay, so I apologize if it's a male, right? This coach, I'm sorry, the coach is working with 5 teachers, more than that, but 5 specific during a 4 to 6 week period. Is that accurate?
Yeah, in that cycle, she was working with 5 teachers in a 4 to 6 week period, plus the lunch bunch, plus all of the interventionists, plus the special ed teacher group. Yes, and then in the next 4 to 6 weeks, she was working with a different set of 7 teachers, the 5 interventionists, the special ed team. And then the next 4 to 6 cycle was a different set of teachers. And because it was teams, it actually ended up being 9 teachers, I think. I'd have to look back on that, plus those other groups.
Perfect. So 2 questions then. The first is, if we hired a coach or 2 coaches or 4 coaches, I mean, it's going to take them quite a while to get to touch all teachers individually, right? Because you're talking a 4-week span. We have 50 elementary, roughly 50 elementary teachers that they would have to work with over a 4-week period, rotating every 4 weeks, right? So it's going to take them quite a significant amount of time. And then just one other follow up, and then do you have any data points of how the teachers feel this has worked out for them? Is that something you could share with us? Because I think that would be extremely helpful as well.
I just have to make sure it's on the screen or you won't be able to see it. Hang on.
Hey, while you're pulling that up, can I say something, Angela?
Please. I mean, Becky says
John,
okay.
we met with her probably 3 or 4 curriculum committee meetings ago. And that schedule that Angela put up in front of everybody really doesn't do her day justice. She is all over the place helping people. And correct me if I'm wrong, Angela, but it says like 5 teachers. She works with 5 teachers 1 week and 7 teachers another week. And it's really, I don't think it's quite like that. It's not a cyclical thing. It's whatever teacher needs help, they actually approach her and they work out something amongst themselves to to get what that teacher needs. And it's a nice little
Yeah.
security blanket for a teacher that might be struggling a little bit.
Yeah,
So
it's
I'll stop talking.
it's a layered approach. I don't so the student-centered coaching cycle is the most intensive level of support. So that's the one I just illustrated through the spreadsheet. The other layer of support is group professional learning, reflection, and engagement in a non-student setting. So for example, that's like the math lunch bunch group that was on that spreadsheet. But she also has evidence that she has engaged in professional learning communities, which are grade level teams of teachers who meet together weekly. I know at LER, she's met with the K team, the one team, a grade 1 team, and the grade 2 team pretty much all year long. And some of those meetings are like at 7 or 7:30 in the morning for an hour. And she's got to be on, ready to roll. And those teachers, they co-design what that agenda is going to look like with the coach and Karen at times. And so the learning that they're getting in that hour is kind of like on-demand learning. And then they go and work on that in their classroom until the next week or two when she comes back. And then they bring stuff to the table and say, you know, I did this, but I wonder about this, and I'm not sure how that went. And then they move through the cycle. So it isn't student-centered coaching because she's not sitting in the classroom with them and co-planning with one teacher at a time. It's not that level of intensity, but it is a level of significant professional support that's focused on both pedagogy and content, and is ongoing in just a different module. And that was not reflected in that spreadsheet. So she does that all the time. And then the third layer of support, the third layer is then the specific scheduled professional learning that we do as a district-wide that she supports. And then the fourth layer is on-demand requests. So a teacher's thinking about something or wondering or sat on a webinar and said, I'm wondering about this. And Lindsay is regularly and routinely, or the coach is regularly and routinely gathering resources, gathering materials, and really being the expert to offer a tailored follow-up for that educator. Most of the time she does it in person, but in some cases it's through email. She's made herself very available to our staff. The document here might illustrate that. This is a mid-year because last year was her first year, so we had a full year review that we shared with the curriculum committee board and then emailed out to the full board. We did a mid-year review this year in anticipation of doing a full year in June. And so just halfway through the year, this is where we're at. So last year, in her very first year in the district, which does take a little time, as you just expressed, John, to kind of get someone up and running and know the people and build a level of trust. She was able to work with 51% of educators last year. Whereas this year, halfway through the year, she's already fully engaged with 67% of our staff. Not necessarily the same group, right, as the year before, some overlap. And then mid-year, we were already on track at Helen Thompson to meet the same coaching support. With Riverview, we had already more than doubled the level of coaching support. At Pittston, more than doubled. At Laura E. Richards School, we had 7 times the level of support up to mid-year. And we actually increased levels of support at the middle school due to the special education work that we were doing. And then, as you can see, there's different layers of support on the right with the types of ways that she engages with staff to support their professional practice. And then here is where these are the professional development and the types of groups that are impacted. And then kind of a little illustration of what a coaching cycle is. And then this data is actually outdated because the numbers that we have at the very bottom increased significantly after we wrote this report. But as you can see, basically most of our staff spend at least 3 to 5 visits or weeks deeply engaged with her. And then those number of visits that equal 1, they're starting to get oriented with her. What does this look like? What does it feel like? And they were just getting started. And then she also does additional work throughout the year that supports our agenda and goals. I think this is what you were referencing, Matt.
Actually, I was more referencing what feedback from the teachers is versus what their actual engagements are.
Oh, so we do have that also, but I don't have that collected universally in a document. We only did figures. We did share more of the anecdotal data with the curriculum committee in a less formal way.
Yeah,
So
I apologize. I'm not able to make those just due to my work
okay.
schedule.
That's okay. We try to make sure we send some of that information out, but in this case, I don't have the compilation of anecdotal data in the same easily accessible way that I do on this more quantitative data.
Sure. No, I appreciate this. It's all great data, and again, it's not that I don't support the idea. I'm not sure I can get on board with supporting it for this next year's budget. And that's,
I understand what you're
opinions are like everybody knows, and that's mine. So.
Yep. Thanks.
Angela, I really appreciate you going over this with us. I think it's really important, not just for the board to see it, but since we're live streaming, it gives an opportunity for our constituents and taxpayers and parents who might be watching to also see exactly what this model looks like and the success that it's bringing currently to the district and then potentially moving on into the future. So thank you very much for being able to just pull that up, and that I apologize for not giving you forewarning.
It's okay.
So other comments or questions from board members?
I have a question.
Yes, Jim.
It's for Angela. And during this remote learning process, how have you been utilizing the coach to date?
That's a great question, Jim. It's an ever-evolving process because we're trying to figure out how to make this most effective. So the first thing she did was make sure that the staff knows that she's available virtually to support them in any way she can. Her kind of an open door, open internet policy. And so what she has been able to do is help teachers design some of their plans, whether it be their video instructional plans in the grade 4-5 community, or whether it be accessing certain types of resources in the grade K-3 community. And she's also been able to provide access to a number of professional learning opportunities for our staff that are taking place virtually and support their movement there. She's also been working diligently behind the scenes on some curriculum development with our main Math and Science Alliance consultant and our math curriculum committee, who's been meeting virtually, so that by June we're better prepared to actually have curriculum guidance to go along with the math program that we just selected. And she's been supporting our Title I math interventionists behind the scenes on some of the work that we've been trying to move forward this year. And she's finding her way. She's got 2 little ones at home, and she's working just like all the other staff on finding time to connect regularly with our faculty when they're ready and able to do so.
I have a follow-up too, please.
Yes, please.
If we go ahead and do I think from one of the gist of the conversation, most of us are in favor of a social worker because I think we all see the need. If we approve the 2 coaches, how do you expect to utilize them? Where are they going to go? What do you envision them doing, please? I know coaching, but
Is it all right, Pat, if I respond
Yes,
to?
please.
Okay. So if there are 2 coaches, there's a couple ways to go. I guess maybe I should say that. One way to go is to increase our math coaching at the K-5 level, especially in light of the fact that we are implementing a new math program and curriculum this coming year, and it takes a number of years to do that really effectively. So that would be an area that I would anticipate adding a math coach. And then the other option with a second coach is to introduce a literacy coach to our district in light of the fact that we are in development stages of our curriculum for literacy K-12. Having a math coach on board before we designed the curriculum was really instrumental for us. And that would parallel the experience in literacy if we had a coach on board before we finished designing curriculum. There are needs at the 6 through 12 level as well, and I'm sensitive to that. So without a full-fledged, fleshed out discussion across the administrative team, I hate to say exactly in which spot we would put those, unless Pat's comfortable with that, but that is my current thinking.
well, what you have told so far, it makes sense to me, and I'm not asking for anything specific, more so than what you've already given us. So I think you've convinced me that we should probably go ahead with both positions. I had a long conversation with Andrea today. She explained what she gave, of what happened, of what we received last meeting. And so I'm in favor of going ahead with them. So thank you very much for the time. Oops.
Jim, thank you. Other board members, any further questions? Questions in general?
Hey, it's Tony.
Hi, Tony.
Hey, Becky. No, I just appreciate that we're having a frank and thorough discussion about it, and I think looking to the future is important. I'm very much in support of the social worker and 2 of the coaching positions. I guess just a little bit of a clarifier for me, and I know a bit about the coaching positions. That's sort of like, I mean, instead of going back to school, it allows teachers to remain current and adapt to current teaching concepts and strategies in the classroom, kind of on the fly. So they don't have to go back somewhere. They're getting it right then. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm definitely in support of both of, or all 3 of those positions, the social worker and the 2 coaching positions. And just my thought is that, particularly around, we've got the money now. I don't know what's happening later. I know it could be hard to add in, but we seem to be at a, knock on wood, a kind of level budget playing field. And I'd like to make sure we have all the resources available to maintain our progress. I am very thoughtful about the one-on-one instruction and that kind of concept, but I'm also very conscious that schools have expanded what's provided within the school over the last decades, and it's it's a really comprehensive, dynamic network now, and I think it makes sense for us to have those in-house resources as much as possible. So I'm in support of those positions. Thank you.
And Tony, that's an interesting perspective that you bring up. I remember in years past, not so currently, but in years past, when we would allow folks to go on retreats or to go to conferences and things to learn, and just the amount of money that those things cost versus this. And I think those we've had to curtail those because we couldn't afford to do those. And this is just a much more consistent and ongoing way to provide for our teachers as they're doing it. I mean, it's wonderful to get to go to a conference and you hear all sorts of really cool and interesting things, and then you bring them back and you want to use them, but they are easily forgotten perhaps, and then also you don't have someone there to say, hey, how'd I do, how did it go? So it's really a newer way of thinking about it. So Tony, I really appreciate you looking at it that way and bringing that up. Other questions or comments?
Just a quick question, Becky.
Sure.
Sorry about that. I was on a call, actually working tonight, but I missed the first part. Is there anything, there's a lot of rumors going around about revenue sharing shortfalls and stuff like that, upwards of 25% for communities and stuff like that. Is there any cushion in that will cover these positions? I'd hate to hire 3 individuals just for next year for us to sit here and cut those positions. I understand we have some funding now, but is there any plans for this shortfall? Because I know municipalities are looking at cuts, et cetera. So I don't know if we had any plans for that, or what the possibility of hiring one coach now and maybe next year hire the next coach.
Go ahead, Andrea. At the beginning of the conversation, Andrea did present some budget information and some money that we're setting aside should there be a curtailment. So Andrea, can you speak to that, please?
Absolutely. One of the documents that I mailed out last Thursday provided an overview of our unallocated fund balance or carry forward. And in that account, we've put aside $500,000 in the event that the state curtails its allocation to the district. While I certainly don't have in place if all 4 communities stop sending tax payments, I don't necessarily think I don't think that will be the case. Municipalities are able to apply for loans called either revenue anticipation loans or tax revenue anticipation loans. I think that if their coffers became short, that they would apply for one of these loans. It's basically a bridge loan until that revenue comes in. They have expenditures. I mean, they are going to need to function, and they're going to need to find a way to capture that tax revenue in the short term. As far as curtailment, what I said earlier is that the last curtailment that we had was prior to ARA funds, approximately when Barack Obama took office, and there were curtailments, and I believe our curtailment was less than 400,000. So I think 500,000 is definitely within the realm of possibility. So I think we've done as best as we can to prepare for the upcoming year.
And we've also been informed that should there be a curtailment, that we will be made aware or should be made aware of that in August. So that's at the beginning of our budget year, which will give us the entire year to plan, to put a freeze on the budget if the 500,000 is not sufficient, and if we need to create additional savings in order to ensure that we cover that shortfall.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. I again apologize for missing the first part of the meeting. So
it's okay. It's okay.
It's great to have you here, Patrick. And Andrea, I really want to thank you for your institutional memory. It's great that you have that and you can remember back to that period of time, and then and are able to so succinctly and, in my opinion, brilliantly bring us into that.
Becky, I'm okay with that, as long as you're not referring to my age. how long I've been here, but thank you.
I would, well, I would never refer to your age in a negative way.
Thank you.
Just your wisdom. So if there are no further questions or comments, I'm wondering if the board is ready, the finance committee is ready to vote on the budget.
I make a motion that we're ready.
I second it.
So it was moved by Alyssa, seconded by
Linda.
Linda, thank you. All right then, so I'll call the roll.
No, well,
Becky, can we be clear on what we're actually voting on?
correct. Well, I need to know that as well. I'm not certain.
So are we voting, okay, the wish of the board to vote on the to vote on the budget as presented, which was with
I would be clear, right? Be very, very clear as to which positions are included in what Alyssa is in her motion.
Yep, I can clarify. That might help.
Thank you.
Yep, I'm presenting the motion to do the last budget that Andrea just sent us while we're in this meeting. That includes the 3 positions of a social worker and 2 coaches.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's what I was assuming, but
Yep.
need that clarification.
Yep.
Thank you. So, and Linda, you're comfortable seconding that?
Yes.
All right, then I will call the roll. Becky Fless, yay. Linda Caputo,
Yay.
Alyssa Tracy,
Yay.
Jim Lockridge. Jim, you're muted. I know.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yay.
Thank you, Jim. And John?
Nay.
Thank you, John.
So that passes, so it will be sent to the full board. I would anticipate a special board meeting, at which time Andrea will have some very specific wording from the attorneys for which you will need to approve this budget. At the same time, it is our hope that you will then have the adult ed budget approved and the school nutrition budget, which you're going to look at next. But before you do that, we also need to set a date for the budget meeting. Andrea and I have talked, and we would like to propose that you set a date for Tuesday, June 23rd for a budget meeting. I forwarded to you this evening a letter that was shared with school districts from Maine School Management that we would need to complete and send off to the Maine Department of Education and the Maine Secretary of State, kind of outlining how we would conduct this budget meeting. In June, we can have no more than 50 people at any one time. So we will need to make sure that we have a plan in place that will allow for us to adhere to the executive orders and the stipulations put forth by the governor to have no more than 50 people at any one time and to ensure adequate social distancing. So most likely what that will have to look like, and we'll work on it, is that we will have this at the high school. We will have some of us in the gymnasium. We may have others in the library. We may have other overflow in the little theater. So we'll have to work out those details. Maybe administrators who are not residents will not be allowed in the gymnasium because we'll really need to be able to limit it to 50 people. We want to make sure that we are allowed and able to accommodate as many voters and taxpayers who wish to attend our meeting. So please know that that will have to be worked on. But can I have thumbs up, I guess, Becky? Is June 3rd acceptable? Will that work for the board? I see a few hands. Yep.
June 23rd, right, Pat? That's what you said?
3rd or
June
23rd?
23rd. Yeah.
23rd, okay. Yep, good
The
with me.
Tuesday evening. And then the referendum, thank you, John. the referendum would be on July 15th. It would coincide with the state referendum. Okay, great. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you, Pat. Next on the agenda is the adult ed budget.
So with the adult ed budget, Andrea, is it you or Josh who's going to present that budget this evening?
Why don't you let me present the numbers, and then I will let Josh talk about his budget and what's in it. Does that seem to make sense?
Yes.
That sounds great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So earlier today, I sent board members and administrators the adult ed budget. So since we have some new board members, I just want to go through the adult ed budget and the way that it's set up, because it's different than the district budget. So the district budget is set up in one fund. It's set up in Fund 1000. The adult ed budget, the state requires adult ed to break out their budget between enrichment. So enrichment classes are those classes such as soap making or trips to Boston or basket weaving. The other half of their budget is instruction and delivery of instruction to individuals, either students in our school through credit recovery or people coming back to adult ed to earn their, and I'm going to say GED, and I know that it's wrong, and I'm sorry, Josh, but I'll let you correct me when the time comes. So that encompasses that part. So 1,500 is the instructional portion, the delivery of instruction, and Fund 6150 is for enrichment. So the worksheet that I provided to you, the summary, I'm just bringing it up in front of me, I apologize, shows an overall increase to the adult ed budget of $993.81. Oops, I lied. I'm sorry. That's the increase to, I'm sorry, only the instructional portion of it. So that's Fund 1,500. The Fund 6150 has an increase of $19,985.47 for an overall increase of $20,979.28. However, there is no increase to the overall. There is no increase to the total amount sent to the 4 communities, but there is a shift in how much each pays. So in addition to the summary, you also have a worksheet, which is separate for adult ed. So if you open the spreadsheet, you will see the budget being proposed of $299,979.28. You will see miscellaneous revenues as follows. Enrichment receipts, which are classes paid for, like I said, basket weaving or trips or soap making. Trip receipts as well. Career and technical receipts for those students who are paying for either a CNA course or some other course through the district. The MSAD11, the appropriation extended day. So when we, as the Finance Committee, reviewed the ED 279, there was a line that I talked about where a portion of our students access adult ed to receive credit, and that is entered in our ED 279. As a result, the district is budgeting, because those monies come directly to the district budgets $14,500 every year towards the adult ed program. Like the district, the adult ed program has carry forward or unallocated fund balance. We plan to use approximately $8,327.04 in fund balance. and there's an enrichment transfer. So basically what happens with adult ed is the bulk of the money is actually made in the enrichment program. And that actually funds or helps to fund the instructional program. As a result, we're using those trip enrichment monies to fund the instruction budget. So there's actually a revenue transfer up to the instructional portion, and that transfers $18,000 and change. The miscellaneous revenue for adult ed totals all the things that I just talked about. It totals $134,338.69. The estimated adult ed subsidy received from the state is $50,190.59. The amount that each of the 4 local communities needs to be assessed as a total is $105,450, the same as it was last year. The overall increase to the 4 communities, as I said, is 0%. The increase to the 4 communities are as follows. There is a decrease of $22.23 to Gardner, an increase of $97.81 to Pittston, a decrease of $74.66 to Randolph, and a decrease of 92 cents to West Gardner. So that's how, because of the valuations and the percentages of the whole, that's how it ended up. I am going to let Josh describe or go through the additions to his budget, and I will chime in if I think there's something we probably need to mention. Does that work, Josh?
Sorry, I had to find my mouse to get the mute off. Thanks, Andrea. And it's high set. It's the same as GED, but it's the high school equivalency test. Very similar, but we just call it something different. So the most significant change that is happening in this budget from last year, from the current year's budget into next year, is with me and adding an additional day to my time as the director, and that is and the corresponding expense. The offset for that is that our academic coordinator has changed the expectations for her position, and still doing quite a bit for us, but that balances somewhat of the increase for my position. We have some reductions in legal services because we have not had the need for some of those expenses at all this year. So we're able to reduce that by half. The issue that we had that was using those expenses is resolved. We're still serving. So the other pieces, there's an increase in career and technical supplies, looking to help with some of our technology in the hopes that we are better prepared to do some of the online learning that we have already been doing this semester. And I think there's a decrease. We do not use right now career and technical education salaries because primarily that's our CNA program that we work with Maine General, and they hire the instructor for that, so we did not have to. So that is reduced pretty significantly, also offset some of the expense for having the 4 days. I think for us next semester, next year, and for a while after, our expectation in adult ed, as I talk with other directors around the state, is that we are an increase in unemployment usually means an increase in people returning to school. And part of our role is to be focused on um, career and college preparedness. We also get some grant funding specific for that, but I think I think the budget helps us do that. I think me having more time here will help us to do that and be prepared for that, because I think we're going to have a different group of students coming to us in the coming year. So did I miss anything, Andrea, about the budget? Just looking. Those are the big changes that I have.
So I'm just going to talk about one of Pat's concerns as far as increasing trips in the COVID crisis. So Delta is, they, believe it or not, Delta has more flexibility in their budget than we have in the district budget, which is a riot. They're allowed to overexpend their budget. We are not allowed to do that through the district budget. But with the his trips, basically, if he doesn't go, there's no expense and there's no revenue, so it kind of negates itself. So I'm not really worried about Josh. His trips are fabulously popular when we're allowed to travel and they fill up. So I have no doubt that if we have trips, if we build it, people will come. So that's the great thing. So with the increase in purchase services, I expect to see the same increase in revenues. And if there is no increase in purchase services for his enrichment trips, there will be no revenue. So that was a concern that Pat had, and I thought that I would address it with all of you. I can't.
Could you address one more thing? The basis for which you receive revenue is also very different from the day school program. Would you speak to that briefly, please?
Do you want me to take this a little, Andrea, and you jump in if I miss anything? So the way we receive revenue is based on a formula that is of what we expend. It's a reimbursement cycle that goes every 2 years. So what we received this year or in the upcoming year was what was based on what we expended 2 years ago. That formula is capped using what the town provides, town or towns, cities provide in local funds, what we receive in state funds, and then what we expend. And so you can't. So the less money a town gives, the less we could actually get in state subsidy. And if we don't actually expend it, then we could end, or we. So if you gave us 105,000 here and we only spent 80,000, that actually reduces the cap and what we can be subsidized as. So so it's quite a bit different than how the schools are funded, and we have to think this year if we underspend, in the coming year, then we could look in 2 years that could hurt us thousands of dollars mostly towards our instruction. So so it's a tough place to be. So you have to, yeah. Does that cover, Andrea? Did I?
For the most part, yes. But with Josh, it's a delicate balancing act because as you remember, I said earlier that his enrichment funds actually provide $18,000 worth of revenue for the instruction. So we need to find that balance. I know while we want to expend our budget down, we need to make sure that we have carry forward in a rainy day in the event that 1 year that $18,000 in enrichment revenue doesn't come in to support the budget. So it's a constant conversation and it's a delicate balancing act. And in a COVID world, I mean, who knows what that will bring. But we think we've brought a very fiscally responsible budget to you. And Pat, do you have anything to add, or Josh?
I do not have anything else to add. I do think it's fiscally conservative. The one thing Josh and I have talked throughout the year, the amount of time that he is spending in the district. and the need based upon the demands of this job for him to be here for 4 days a week versus 5 days a week is real. And in order to make that happen, I really appreciate the fact that he worked with staff to make reductions elsewhere, because when it was decided to make that a part-time job 2 years ago, we created a position to cover those 2 days and some of the job responsibilities that the director wouldn't be able to perform. So I really appreciate the fact that he went back, he honored that role that the individual is performing, but also made reductions appropriately. So the funds, so that the request for the increase in the time was not just added to the budget, but was really incorporated into it in a fiscally responsible way. So thank you.
All right then, are there questions from board members? Seeing a lot of shaking heads. All right then, are we ready to vote as a finance committee on the adult ed budget as presented?
Make a motion, we vote as presented. Becky?
Thank you, Alyssa. May I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Linda. I will call the roll then. Becky Pless, yay. Linda Caputo,
yay.
Alyssa Tracy,
yay.
Jim Lothridge,
Yay.
and John Umlin.
Yay.
Thank you very much. Next thing on the agenda is the food service budget.
That is also Andrea. She will present that budget.
I figured.
All right. So among the things that you received from me today is another email containing the food service budget and revenues, which are two separate documents. So the food service budget overall is up. I just want to make sure, before I start giving figures, I want to make sure I'm at the last page at this time. Is up $36,064.60, or 3.43%. So the majority of that increase is salaries as a result of the last time the CBA negotiated. And the other part of that is dental insurance. We are beginning to pay for full dental insurance for our food service employees. So that was budgeted. So that is the bulk of the increase. What I will say right now is this budget was prepared prior to COVID, and it's in line with what our typical budget looks like. I'm not, it is my opinion that this is the best that we can do under the circumstances that we know as of right now. But it is such a change feeding kids when they are in school versus through the summer feeding program, or which is what we're calling what the state is calling what we are doing now. But part of the conversation, and I should, before I even start talking about this, part of the conversation that we as business managers were having yesterday in an online conversation is that for some districts, this COVID thing is creating huge budget shortfalls within their food service. So, and the reason for that is when students take lunch through the food service program, through the regular class day, there's a different reimbursement rate than through the summer feeding program. So while I am confident this budget is in line with other budgets, I I do have some concerns regarding the revenue that is projected. So it will really depend on what the following school year looks like. Unlike our district budget, where I know where most of our revenue is coming from, the revenue from the food service program is from parents, and it's also a result of the reimbursement rate that we are getting on lunch and breakfast. So we need to set a food service budget. I believe that this is the best budget that can be created at this time, knowing what we know. And I'm not really sure what else to say about it. There are a lot of things depending on how school progresses through this year. Pat?
I'm not sure that I can add. There's just, again, so many unknowns. I mean, we've talked about the possibility of there being remote learning in some capacity next year. Maybe not necessarily full-time, but in some capacity. And as of right now, if you provide remote learning, you still need to figure out a way of providing meals for those students who are at home. So there is the possibility as we begin next year that our food service staff will need to be creating on-site meals as well as preparing meals for off-site should we be running both systems simultaneously. But we don't know. We just don't know yet. Guidelines for next year and for the opening of school is expected to be released somewhere around the end of May. So once we get to see what those guidelines are, we'll pull a committee together. We'll start talking about what all of our options are. And then, 2-3 months from now, we may have a better idea. Unfortunately, we're in a situation there where you have to approve the budgets now. We can't wait for 2 or 3 months when we have all of the answers to be able to approve. So, I appreciate the fact that Andrea has pulled together, along with Linda Surgeon, the best informed budget as reasonable at this present time. And I suggest that we move forward with it. And we will, as always, continue to do our best to actually function within that budget set forth. And should there be an issue, once we get back to school, then of course that information will be shared with the board.
One of the things I would like to bring the board's attention to is, with the exception of $252,000. So let me back up. The school lunch program is not self-funding. It cannot fund itself through student sales and federal reimbursement. So in the general budget, there is a line that we transfer every year from the district budget to the lunch program to make it zero. So the lunch program is not allowed to make money, and we only transfer in at the end of the year the amount of money that is needed to bring it whole, because it always ends up in the hole, different kind of hole. So this year, there's an increase in the amount of transfer of $26,864, and that's based on projected revenues and costs. So the part I want to discuss for a second is that at the end of next year, that may not be enough to plug the deficit that the food service program has. So next year we might have to end the year in the negative and have to look at how we address that the following year. I just want to raise that as a possibility. I'm hearing other municipalities and towns discuss it. How much of a deficit there is depends on how many months we're in school, how many months we're remote, or any combination thereof. But I just wanted the committee and the school board to realize where some of the money came from and the responsibility of the district to make the program whole. So I just thought that I would mention that.
Thank you, Andrea. Jim, you had a question?
Yes. Andrea, if you think there's a possibility that we'll be in the negative, nobody can foresee what's going to happen. Do you think we should be adding another 10% to this budget to be safe?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. I budgeted this based on school being in session for the regular year. I am banking on the fact that if school is not in session, that we will have reduced offerings and that our expenditures will not be as such as though we were in school. So I'm hoping that the revenues and the expenditures somewhat offset. But unfortunately, I only have a month of, this is all new. We have never done the summer feeding program or the reimbursement program through the state that we're doing now. I don't have enough information to see a trend or what that reimbursement looks like, nor do I have any sort of a trend to see what our expenditures would look like. There were startup costs. So I only have a full month of April. So I feel that the budget that's being proposed is adequate at this time. However, I would feel that I was being remiss if I didn't mention the possibility of what other schools are going through at this time. They are seeing deficits, and
The other thing as a reminder is the CARES Act, that we do have that application that is going to be submitted. And as Angela previously mentioned, throughout the course of the year, we can make some adjustments to how we spend that money. So if indeed we find that there is going to be a shortfall with our food service program, there is the potential opportunity for us to redirect some of those funds to cover those costs.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions from board members?
Just to be clear, though, if we can't use care funds, that comes any shortfalls would have to be made up from our past budget. Is that accurate?
any shortfall in funds would need to be budgeted for in the 2022 budget year. We would have to make an additional appropriation or find another way of getting ourselves out of a deficit. So, you know, there are other ways than just budgeting additional funds. I mean, so, but yep, we would have to look at that.
And what you mean by that, Andrea, is that there may be other expenditures that we had planned on that we, for whatever reason, we don't spend money on,
Yep.
right? Okay.
Correct. Sorry. Yes. So in her budget right now, there is minimal equipment for next year. It used to be years ago that we didn't budget any equipment to be replaced, and what we ended up with, it was a bunch of food service equipment that would die, and we were struggling to, and it always seems to go at once. So in this budget, there is a replacement dishwasher for Helen Thompson School. It's approximately $10,000 with installation. Installation is always a huge piece of that. Other than that, in Linda's budget and repairs, it's basically food and personnel. So you've got your staff, your health insurance, your food costs, and minimal for repairs and equipment. We try to do equipment every year. And I asked her what she needed, and she needed a new dishwasher at Helen Thompson. It's been giving her trouble for quite a few years, and this budget was a year that we thought that we could address it. Any more questions?
Then I would ask, I would entertain a motion and a second to accept the food service budget as written.
I'd move that we accept the food and nutrition budget as presented.
Thank you, Jim. And a second?
I can
I'll
second.
second.
Yep. whatever.
Second from John. Questions or comments? I will call the roll. Becky Fless, yay. Linda Caputo,
Yay.
Alyssa Tracy,
Yay.
Jim Lockridge,
Yay.
and John Umland.
Yay.
A collective yay. All right then. Future agenda items.
Future agenda items, we do have lots of warrants that need to be signed by members of finance. Maybe at some point, Andrea, we could work out a schedule so that board members could come in individually and sign those warrants. We could spread them out, have you come in, sign them. We need to do that hopefully within the next couple weeks, if possible.
Would that work for finance committee members? Can I see a thumbs up? Great. John, there you go. There's your thumb. All right, great.
And then I guess the other thing would be just Andrea and I will discuss timelines in which she will be able to pull together the necessary paperwork for the board to approve or to consider the recommendation of these budgets for approval. And so we will work with Becky, Veronica to come up with a date and put that out to the entire board. But my guess is that it will be sometime next week. Correct, Andrea?
So just to be clear, we're looking at setting the budget next week and then scheduling another meeting after that to actually sign the warrants. Once the budget is set, I will ask Drummond Woodson to prepare budget documents that will need to be sent to all 4 communities. So for those of you who remember, it's usually quite a production, and I'm sure that this pandemic is going to make it more of a production, but we'll try to make it as painless as we possibly can.
Andrea, thank you. Any other? I'd like to thank our administrative staff, all of our building principals, Terry. I'll stop naming anybody because somebody will get forgotten, not intentionally. But I'd just like to thank all of our administrators for working so hard remotely and together apart on this budget. I'd like to thank the board for your questions, for your civility and respect for one another and the kindness with which we operate, and for the hard work that's happening around this box that is now our normal. And a special thank you to Angela for just being on your toes and ready when I asked you for something that we hadn't talked about previously, and for taking the lead tonight and leading us through the coaching questions and doing it so beautifully. I really appreciate that. So if there's nothing else, I'd like to say thank you finally and adjourn us.
Hey, can I say something?
Sure.
Pat, I got your email. Well, actually, it looked like while we were in the meeting here, or maybe I didn't read it until just now, but the update to caregivers and families.
Yes.
Very articulate, and thank you for keeping everybody informed. I think obviously in a time like this, it's important to keep everybody up to speed as to what's going on, so it lowers their stress level and everything else. So thank you for sending that out.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. Yeah, we're trying to find that balance of not overwhelming families with too many communications. So I appreciate your feedback.
Great. All right then. We're adjourned. Until
Nice.
next time. Nice to see
Bye.
you. Thank you
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.